Chapter 392. The lights dimmed. Fujio, who was asleep, didn't know that the comments on the internet had started to change. It was all because of Callie. What happened today made them very angry. Lioli was the one with the darkest eyes. Fujio's picking up of Han Susu messed up her plan, and she was kicked out of the Han family. Originally, she wanted to take advantage of Han Susu's anger to say something bad about Fujio, so she didn't lose too badly. Unexpectedly, Han Feng didn't let them get close to Han Susu. He said that it was getting late and that they should go home early. In fact, his attitude wasn't like that. "Captain, what should we do now?" Before Lioli could speak, someone was holding a phone and said, "Wait a minute, look at this." It was an official post, right? Their previous posts were starting to have an effect. Someone had already started to say, "Although I like watching Spadesy play games, he is not a good person. He has such a bad temper. Yeah, his fans are also a bunch of brainless fans." That's enough. As soon as that person finished speaking, the post was deleted. Once it was deleted, that person was not convinced. "Admin, why did you delete my post?" *CKU. The curses at the end were very harsh. Someone even comforted that person. "It's normal. My post was also deleted. I feel sorry for the original poster." What's more, someone left a comment saying, "It seems that someone left a comment to slander you. I think it has something to do with Spadesy himself. He has a problem with everyone. I'm a fan. Give up. I'm not a fan of Spadesy, but I'm a fan of the Supreme Alliance. I think the Supreme Alliance should reconsider whether to let Spadesy play in the national competition. To be honest, I've never seen anyone like him. It was because of these people that the Cali team was happy to watch." Lioli laughed. "What did I say? Some things don't need to be done by ourselves. We just need a little bit of encouragement, and people will follow." The Cali team was happy. This useless young master Fu deserves to be scolded. Lioli glanced at the official post again. Unfortunately, the scolding is not enthusiastic enough. After all, these people are the minority, so we need to add more fuel to the fire. "Captain, do you have any good ideas?" Hearing this, the eyes of the Cali team lit up. Lioli touched the phone screen. Han Susu was the best at this, but it seems that we can only turn to the Fu family. The Fu family? Someone was confused. "What do you mean by looking for the Fu family?" Lioli lifted her lips lightly. "We aren't the only ones who want Spadesy to leave Supreme Alliance. There are a few others, such as his half-brother, Fu Shiming." When Team Cali heard this, a smile appeared on their faces. "Captain means to leave it to him. He has a good mother and knows how to use public opinion to create hype." Remember, there are some things in the esports circle that are no different from the entertainment circle. If something is said many times, it will become true. Find a time to send these posts to Fu Shiming. Be quick. No problem. Their Cali team was not a weakling. They would never let anyone bully them like this. Didn't Spadesy think he was so great just because he joined Supreme Alliance? Then they would think of a way to get him out. The next day. Chapter 393. Some time ago, thanks to the heavy smog, all the elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools in Jiang City had to suspend classes for 2 days. As a result, Fujio's biological clock was a bit messed up. When she sat up, she yawned lazily. When she turned her head, it was already 8:10. Their first class was at 8:30. And in the crazy number 1 middle school, if someone was late, the uncle guarding the door would record it. There were still 3 days before the national competition. She couldn't be disqualified because of such a small thing. Fujio washed her face very quickly. She didn't look like a girl at all. She put on her school jacket handsomely and skateboarded quickly through the crowd. 10 minutes left. Fujio calculated the time and suddenly stopped the skateboard. She looked in the direction of the school from this direction. The distance was too long. It seemed like she had to take a shortcut. There was a middle school student who rode his bike to school, but he didn't understand why the person in the same school uniform as him suddenly turned around and went in another direction. Class was about to start. Where was that guy going? No matter, he had to rush forward. He couldn't get a demerit. Swoosh. Fujio pushed off with her left leg, stopped the skateboard, and began to estimate the height of the school wall. That's right, Fujio was going to climb over the wall. There was an uncle buying roasted sweet potatoes at the back wall of the school. Seeing the young man stop at such a place and stare at the wall, the corner of his mouth twitched with a cigarette in his mouth. These kids are really... They can't even behave in school. It was a bit high. Fujio made a preliminary judgment and began to look for a foothold. Be careful not to get caught by your school director. The uncle reminded Fujio. She smiled and looked at her watch one last time. There were still 5 minutes left. That was enough. Just as Fujio was about to take a big step, a commotion came from the bustling crowd on the left. There were about 3 or 4 students from number 2 middle school, and they were surrounding a beautiful girl who was dressed like hooligans. That girl looked familiar. She had seen her yesterday. Fujio looked up at the wall on the left, and then at the situation there. Finally, she turned around decisively. The uncle was surprised. You're not going to climb? He's waiting to see this guy wrestle. Fujio waved her hand. I'll do it later. To be honest, Fujio only cared about this because of the Almighty. Based on yesterday's situation, that person with the surname Han should be the Almighty's friend. Since they're friends, I'll save them first. On the other side, Han Susu felt that she was extremely unlucky. She came here to warn Brother Jiang's fat stepsister not to have any other ideas about Brother Jiang, so she didn't bring anyone with her. She didn't expect to encounter such a thing. Get out of my way. Do you know who I am? How dare you treat me like this? Beauty, what's wrong with us? We just want to play with you, right? As he spoke, he reached out to grab Han Susu's hand. But just as he moved, a gust of wind came from behind him. Something was charging straight at the back of his leg, causing him to turn around in shock. Seeing that it was Fujio, that person was amused. Look, I was wondering who it was. The useless nouveau riche is here to give us money again. Fujio indeed knew that person. In the past, she had been stopped in a corner and given money to him several times. Since there was a conflict between them, then there was no need to be long-winded. Chapter 394. Yo, as if you're so great. The people from number 2 middle school were amused by Fujio's words. Fujio's voice was indifferent. You have 2 choices. Either you leave, or we start beating you up. Which one do you choose? Of course, we'll beat you to death. One of them had a ferocious look on his face. Han Susu looked at the handsome silver-haired young man, reached out to pull up the zipper of her uniform, and walked over. Even her smile carried a sense of ruthlessness. F*CKU. You little scum, are you trying to rebel? Before that person could finish his words, his knee was kicked hard. Fujio said 3 minutes, and she meant it. Her kick was high, and she used a lot of strength. 1 versus 4. 1 was already down. How could the leader let it go? While Fujio was still kicking, he grabbed Fujio's skateboard and wanted to throw it at Fujio's back. If it really hit, it would definitely be a serious injury. But it was Fujio, so how could she be hit? With a beautiful sidestep and a back kick, even Fujio's school uniform made a sharp sound in the wind. Bam! That person was directly kicked into the wall. The skateboard automatically returned to Fujio's feet. Han Susu watched from the side. She didn't know when it started, but the young man's figure was the only thing in her eyes. She had never seen anyone fight so handsomely. 2 people from number 2 middle school were kicked to their knees. The other one had bruises on his face, and the leader was dizzy. Fujio was unscathed as she held on to her skateboard. She had a faint smile on her face, and she was extremely handsome. Who are you calling a little scum? I'll give you 3 seconds to leave, or I'll continue beating you up. The person who was kicked was really in pain. The 4 of them looked at the situation together. They had to call for help. You motherf asterisk cur, just you wait. The leader didn't forget to point at Fujio while running away. Fujio thought to herself, I only have 2.5 minutes to go to class, so I won't wait for you. He turned around, got on the board, and was about to leave. Han Susu was still mesmerized by the young man's side profile, and her heart was beating so fast that it didn't seem to belong to her. Now that he was about to leave, she anxiously reached out and grabbed the young man's uniform, her face a little red. This time, I really have to thank you. It was my fault yesterday. How about I treat you to a meal? No need. Fujio pulled her school uniform back, her expression indifferent. I helped because of Brother Mo. Fujio didn't want to have anything to do with this kind of girl. Although in Fujio's heart, all girls were cute. However, she would still stay away from this kind of person. Who knew that the more Fujio acted like this, the more Han Susu thought the young man was cool, and the more her face burned. Fujio didn't have time to care about these trivial things. There were less than 2 minutes left. He took the skateboard and clamped it under his arm. His long legs kicked the poplar tree beside him. Using the momentum, he leaped onto the wall. Beautiful. The uncle selling sweet potatoes applauded with a cigarette in his mouth. It would have been better if he hadn't applauded, but his clapping attracted the attention of the guard 700 meters away. The guard turned his head, and his eyes widened. He pointed at Fujio with his notebook. You. The one standing on the wall. Which class are you from? Chapter 395. The guard chased after them without saying a word. The students who were stopped outside the school gate were overjoyed. The ones who were writing on the wooden desks rose up. They didn't need to fill in the forms, so they ran while no one was around. The guard was confused. He turned left and right, but he didn't know who to chase. He could only widen his eyes and point. Stop. Stop. What he didn't know was that Fujio was leaning on the nearest pillar. She looked sideways at him and curled up the corner of her mouth, looking very evil. It was impossible to be late. But number 1 middle school had strict management. The guard felt that this matter had seriously affected his work, and he had been talking to the dean about it the whole morning. This must be premeditated. They just want to be late. The guard said with a serious face, the one who climbed over the wall is the best. He must be warned. The dean didn't even raise his head. Which class is he from? What's his name? The guard shook his head and said immediately, but his hair seems to be silver. This was the dean's first reaction. This was the first reaction of the director of teaching. The dean was very cautious when dealing with Fujio. Not to mention that Fujio's grades were the best in the school, just looking at CEO Chin. CEO Chin. The dean's eyes lit up. He reached out and dialed Chin Mo's number. The teaching director's eyes lit up. He reached out and dialed Chin Mo's number. As a parent, CEO Chin gave him his private number last time. At the same time, on the top floor of the Chin group, Chin Mo, who was signing company documents, paused when he saw the caller on the screen. Secretary Liang was still standing next to him. He was very confused. That title. Dean of number 1 middle school? Since when did CEO Chin have the number of the school's dean on his phone? Hello? Chin Mo answered the phone while standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. The director of teaching told him the whole story. Climbed over the wall? Chin Mo raised his eyebrows because of this word, but his handsome face didn't change at all. After the director of teaching finished speaking, he said slowly, Director Lee, are you sure it's my brother? The guards said that the one who climbed over the wall seemed to have silver hair. In the whole number 1 middle school, only Fujio hasn't dyed her hair back. Dean Lee, who didn't realize that he was being tricked, said this, and the guards still nodded. Chin Mo laughed. Seems like. In other words, Chief Lee was not sure either. This. Director Lee still wanted to say something. Chin Mo's voice was calm. My brother is so obedient and loves to learn. I don't think he would climb over the wall. Obedient and studious? No matter if it was Director Lee on the other end of the phone or Secretary Liang at the scene, after hearing this comment, they all wanted to ask Boss Chin if he didn't have a guilty conscience. That Fujio, who had so many leave slips, was obedient and loved to study. They don't read much, so don't lie. No matter how focused Secretary Liang was, Chin Mo didn't care. He continued to speak into the phone slowly. Or does Director Lee want me to attend a parent-teacher conference now? No. No need. As soon as he thought of that scene, Director Lee immediately sobered up. I'll check again. Yes, check again. It might not be student Fujio. Chin Mo laughed again. Then we'll wait for Director Lee to investigate before calling. Okay. What was there to investigate? Compared to CEO Chin coming to the parent-teacher conference in person, climbing over the wall was nothing. Director Lee muttered in his heart. What's more, there were no cameras, and there was no evidence. The person who climbed over the wall was too good at finding blind spots. After hanging up, Chin Mo glanced at someone's WeChat on his phone. His brother was really something. Climbing over the wall? Secretary Liang looked at his boss, but his eyes never left his phone. He hesitated and asked tentatively, CEO Chin, do you need me to send someone to the school? No need. Chin Mo's fingers slid down, and he threw his phone back. His side profile was cool and handsome. This action made Secretary Liang realize something again. Ever since yesterday, Boss Chin had been acting strangely. When he wasn't holding his phone, his eyes would glance at it. When he picked up his phone, he would immediately put it down, as if he was controlling himself. What was going on? Fujio didn't know that the director of teaching had reported her to the Almighty. She was sitting in the back seat, yawning lazily. But those students from number 2 middle school who had been taught a lesson by her couldn't take it anymore and told their boss. That boss was still playing hero on his phone. When he heard that his people were being bullied, he got angry instantly. How dare you challenge the authority of our number 2 middle school? Call for help. Stop him. Just like that, when the students of number 1 middle school got out of school, they saw more than 10 students from number 2 middle school standing outside the school gate. Lu Zhongming thought that these people were here for him. As the boss of number 1 middle school, he didn't even dare to step out of the school gate. Since those people were standing in front of the school, the guards didn't dare to interfere. Some girls would feel scared when they saw such a scene. After all, there were a few people on the other side, and they were indeed very arrogant. When Han Susu asked the driver to drive her over, she saw this scene, and her eyes suddenly widened. Those people were obviously from the morning. Han Susu wanted to get out of the car, but she was afraid. There were more than 10 of them, and her driver was old. These people were definitely here to cause trouble for the young man. Han Susu changed her mind, sat up straight, and said to the driver, "Don't wait here, go straight to the school gate." She had to inform the young man. However, cars needed to be registered in number 1 middle school. That was the opening. Fujio had already walked over from the other side of the school's main road. He was still in his school uniform, with long slender legs, silver hair, and a handsome face. Han Susu felt that her heart was beating abnormally again. Among so many people, only the young man seemed to be colorful. What was not perfect was that there were too many girls following behind him. Han Susu looked at the girl surrounding Fujio, and her eyes sank. Forget it, which school didn't have love-struck girls? The most important thing now was to make sure the young man didn't go out. As soon as she opened her mouth. She saw the group of people outside the school start to move. Some of them saw Fujio and were about to walk over. They were very aggressive, and they were pushing people around randomly. Fujio stopped in her tracks. She didn't look at Han Susu, but walked past her and looked at the movement not far away. Motherf asterisk her, I finally see that little trash. The person who was kicked in the morning looked more ferocious than anyone else. He wanted to punch Fujio flat. Fujio's eyes shifted to the road on her left. If it weren't for Fujio's action, Han Susu wouldn't have noticed that there were people there. She was still in a daze. Chapter 396. By the time Han Susu realized what was going on, her legs had already obeyed the young man's order and walked inside. When he turned around, he could only see the back of that tall and straight figure. The students of No. 2 middle school were obviously people who often fought, and they knew how to surround people. Left, right, front, and all three directions. Unless that little weakling retreated, he couldn't escape from any direction. But even if he retreated, he had to come out and go home. That person wanted to block him here and catch him. But this method was suitable for others, but not for Fujio. First of all, she didn't want to retreat. The girls were all here, so she had to let them go first. What's more, others couldn't avoid this seemingly tight encirclement, but it didn't mean that she couldn't. After all, apart from Fujio, she was Z. Even the police couldn't catch her, Z. The No. 1 middle school gate was bustling. That kind of scene couldn't be described with words. There was definitely going to be a fight. The guard was already making a phone call with trembling fingers. But Fujio just stood there with a lollipop in her mouth. She pulled open her school uniform and put the cap on her head. There was a camera in front of her. Even if there was a fight, she had to pay attention to the evidence. She had to maintain her good behavior and avoid calling her parents. That guy from No. 2 middle school saw that this guy didn't retreat, so he shouted at the boss who was still looking around, "Brother who, it's that guy. Over here, at the school gate." That boss turned around, and his fiery eyes met the young man's handsome face directly. Then, he was dumbfounded. What the F***, wasn't this the master who helped them play games yesterday? What did he mean? He was the one they were going to beat up. This was so F***ing embarrassing. Fujio also recognized him, and her beautiful eyebrows raised. Troublesome Chinibu. No. 2 middle school's boss. What the hell is troublesome Chinibu? F***cu. Someone next to Fujio wanted to jump up. The troublesome guy blocked with his arm in a very professional manner. Stop, stop. What's going on? Not only the students from No. 2 middle school were at a loss, but even the girls from No. 1 middle school, who had their hearts in their throats, paused. The gangster coughed heavily and approached Fujio very seriously. He lowered his voice and said, "Did you beat up our people this morning?" "I did." Fujio's thin lips curled up, and her eyes were filled with coldness. "Why? You want to fight back?" The gangster looked at the teenager and thought of the beautiful skills in the barbecue shop and the other man's abuse. Somehow, he felt a chill down his spine. "Why would I? I'm just asking." Although the gangster was Chinibu, he was very loyal to his friends. He turned around and said to his little brothers, "Let's disperse for today. This is our second middle school's benefactor. In the future, be more polite when you see my benefactor. Otherwise, you're making things difficult for me, Wang Dehu." How could someone who was beaten up in the morning accept such an ending? Benefactor? The girls from No. 1 middle school were also puzzled. When did Their Highness Jiao become the benefactor of that old vulgar Wang? These two people know each other? They even played together before? Her temperament didn't match her at all. Wang Dehu, who was standing next to Fujio, really didn't match. Wang Dehu was the real bad student, and it was written all over his face. Fujio, at least, looked like a straight-A student, the kind that was well-versed in physics and chemistry. "Come and say thank you to our benefactor." Wang Da, who is the best? Chapter 397. Thank you, benefactor. There were more than 10 young men, and their voices were so loud that Fu Jiu wanted to facepalm. Anyone who saw this would think that he was recognizing a new boss. Fu Jiu looked at the gangster. Oh no, he should be called Wang Dahu now. I'm just helping you play a game, that's not a simple game. The gangster said with a serious face, it's related to the honor of our second middle school. That's right. There were actually people who echoed from the side. This was the world of Chinibu. Fu Jiu found it funny again. She lifted the corner of her mouth and put one hand in her pocket. She made a detour gesture with the other hand. Ask the people from second high to leave. You're all standing here and scaring the girls. Did I scare the girls? Wang Dahu's face was full of disbelief. How did it scare them? We're so handsome. Fu Jiu. It seemed like these Chinibu kids were way off base when it came to being handsome. No, benefactor, I will tell you a secret. Wang Dahu said in a serious tone, every time we make a move like this, a lot of heads turn to look at us. Aren't the girls from number 1 middle school good looking? But when we go out alone, they don't think much of us. This time, everyone is so enthusiastic. To be honest, part of the reason is to stop you, and the other reason is to let the girls admire our handsomeness. Fu Jiu. Oh. What does "oh" mean? Wang Dahu felt that communicating with cultured people was tiring. Fu Jiu looked at his ferocious look. Without saying a word, she turned around and walked over to a girl. She said in a gentle and pleasant voice, "Were you scared just now?" The girl blushed. She nodded her head and said excitedly, "With Highness Jiu here, we are not afraid." Be good. Fu Jiu smiled faintly. After saying that word, she walked back and said to Wang Dahu indifferently, "This is what you call handsome." Wang Dahu, damn, no girl had ever blushed in front of him. This gap was a critical hit. Wang Dahu didn't want the girl to be afraid of them, so he turned around and asked his brothers to disperse. When you leave, be gentle and smile. Smile? Boss, didn't you say that you want to be cool? Nowadays, girls like to be cold and aloof. When Fu Jiu heard this, she raised her head silently. Wang Dahu replied in a low voice, "I'll ask my benefactor about this. You guys go back first and wait for my news." All right. In the eyes of some students, Fu Jiu's move just now was indeed amazing. Disbanded just like that? The guard was still dumbfounded. Wang Dahu said to Fu Jiu seriously, "Benefactor, please advise me on how to pursue girls in the future." Sure. Fu Jiu's voice was indifferent. Wang Dahu felt that he had taken advantage of the situation. He then heard Fu Jiu say, "Your second high school's curriculum should be the same as our first high school's, right?" Yeah, the progress is the same. Wang Dahu wasn't wary at all. Fu Jiu chuckled. That's good. I'll leave my homework to you in the future. Wang Dahu was speechless. What happened to being a cultured person and a top student? What, you don't want to? Fu Jiu looked at his expression and raised her eyebrows with a smile. Wang Dahu gritted his teeth. Fine. Everything is for the girl. Seeing that you are so sincere, I'll teach you a secret technique to pursue girls. Fu Jiu crooked her finger. It was indeed cool. Wang Dahu moved closer excitedly. What secret technique? Fu Jiu only threw 2 words at him. Good looks. Chapter 398. 10,000 critical hit. The people next to Wang Dahu looked at the frozen Wang Dahu, and they didn't know what Fu Jiu said to him. But seeing Wang Dahu being subdued by the young man, those who were prejudiced against Fu Jiu now became quiet. After all, some people were like this, susceptible to the soft approach and afraid of the hard approach. They were waiting to see Fu Jiu get beaten up. But who would have thought? Wang Dahu seemed to have his claws removed in front of Fu Jiu. Not only did he not fight, but he also seemed to respect Fujio. Compared to Fujio, some boys were even more cowardly. On the same day, someone posted Fujio's picture on the school intranet. The title was, "One Man Against 1,000, our #1 middle school's most handsome school hunk." There was a string of comments below. After all, from that angle, Fujio did look very picturesque, and it even gave people the illusion of a scene that only appeared in comics. Fujio's actions of protecting the girls could only be understood by those who experienced it themselves. Among them, the most obvious change was Han Susu. She looked at the young man who was still talking to Wang Dahu. Her heart was beating fast, and even her breathing seemed to be slower than usual. Her brother was right. She shouldn't just listen to Sister Lioli and think that the young man was bad. Even if he looked like a tasteless nouveau riche in the past, it was different now. Han Susu looked up, and her eyes were full of infatuation. Lu Zongming was still hiding at the school gate. After hiding for a while, seeing that everyone was back to normal, he grabbed a classmate and asked, "Where are the #2 middle school students at the school gate?" They all left. Left? Why? Fujio was there alone, so they didn't dare to move. I think it was because Fujio helped them play a game or something, but I don't know the details. Game? Lu Zongming instantly remembered the scene of their team being wiped out yesterday, and his eyes turned red. Fujio, the traitor of #1 middle school. He didn't say anything and immediately told Fu Ximing the news. At the same time, Fu Ximing also received something from the Cali team. When he saw that #1 middle school's hunk post on the school intranet, Fu Ximing felt a surge of resentment that couldn't be released no matter how hard he tried. He didn't know when, but that good-for-nothing had suppressed him in every way. Study, he did better than her. Games, he played better than her. Now, even the title of #1 middle school's hunk was being applied to that person? How could the spoiled Fu Ximing endure this? Now, he had these things in his hands. Fu Ximing glanced at the message on the screen and handed it to his mother without hesitation. Chapter 399. Captain, there's news from Fu Ximing. That night, the Cali team sat in front of the computer and looked back. Lioli stood up. What did they say? What else can they say? Everything is as Captain predicted. Fu Ximing wants that useless young Master Fu out of Supreme Alliance even more than we do. He even asked us to continue posting, and tomorrow, the entire esports industry will know about it. Fu Ximing smiled, his expression indescribable satisfaction. That's right. Lioli looked down. In this case, Fujio is really finished. Who cares if he's finished or not? Captain, I know you are soft-hearted. Think about it, if it weren't for Fujio, would our relationship with the Supreme Alliance be so tense? When he's gone, we can slowly repair our relationship with the Supreme Alliance. Lioli listened to her teammates and seemed to be convinced. Well, that's all we can do. In fact, she was the one who came up with the idea. How could she be soft-hearted? She just had to put on a show. There were only 3 days left before the National League. It was just the right time to kick Fujio out of the Supreme Alliance. A newbie would die if she was too strong. If she didn't even understand this, how could she be in the esports circle? Lioli lowered her eyes. It was time to end the Qin and Tao couple. Even if that man wasn't hers, he shouldn't be anyone else's. The night was getting darker and darker. The lingering fog had almost become a synonym for Jiang City. Han Feng really didn't understand his sister. Yesterday, she said that Fujio was narrow-minded. Today, she said that she must treat Fujio to a meal. One was to apologize, and the other was to thank her. If it weren't for Fujio, she wouldn't know how badly she would be bullied now. Han Feng also wanted to find a chance to sit down and talk with Qin Mo. Now his youngest sister had given in and was even pestering him. If he didn't call, Han Susu would make a fuss upstairs. Han Feng shook his head. First, he sent a letter to Qin Mo through Jiang Zhua, saying that he must bring Fu Jiao and that the siblings would apologize in person. When Qin Mo answered the phone, he stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the lights of the entire city. Qin Mo, are you still there? Jiang Zhua hadn't gotten a reply for a long time, so he thought the discussion wasn't going to go through. Unexpectedly, Qin Mo spoke in a calm voice, I'm going to the Fu family's house to fetch that guy. Tell me a place. Jiang Zhua told him the address before hanging up. He had a vague feeling that something was wrong with his friend today. It was just that he couldn't tell exactly what was wrong. Qin Mo retracted his gaze. If he suddenly appeared at the Fu family's house, a certain someone would be in a daze with a lollipop in her mouth. He couldn't help but smile. Secretary Liang was watching from the side. Maybe one day. Boss Qin had never smiled before. Was he wearing this expression because he was going to the Fu family? He really wasn't thinking too much. It was because Boss Qin was too obvious. Most importantly, President Qin, have you considered the Fu family's ability to accept you going to the Fu family just like that? When Secretary Liang saw that his CEO was leaving, he subconsciously wanted to follow him. Qin Mo was indifferent and abstinent. He wore a well-ironed suit on the inside and a pure black windbreaker with a circle of velvet on the outside. He looked like a vampire aristocrat that often appeared in foreign movies. His skin was fair and his eyes were deep. He turned back and glanced at him. Chapter 400. The atmosphere in the Fu family was weird today. That's right, it was weird. He Honghua wasn't cooking soup in the kitchen or walking around in her bright red pajamas. Instead, she was sitting on the sofa obediently. Fu Jiao saw this when she came downstairs. She looked up at the person sitting in the living room and paused. Brother Mo? All right, she finally knew why her mom was so obedient. The Almighty's aura was really strong, especially when he was wearing a black trench coat. But why did the Almighty come without telling her? At this hour? Fu Jiao raised her eyebrows in that direction. Her mom pulled her to the side and said in a low voice, CEO Qin brought me a lot of supplements. Jiao, do you think I should take them? It wasn't a betrothal gift, why was her mom so nervous? Yes. Fu Jiao was never polite to Qin Mo. After saying that, she sat down next to Qin Mo. Why are you here so late? Qin Mo glanced at the youngster. Jiang City had started heating up, so the house was so warm that Fu Jiao was only wearing a pure white sweater, and her face was a little pink from the heat. At such a close look, the clean and fine hair on her side profile was even more obvious. Qin Mo's eyes darkened, and he leaned over and said in a calm voice, Nothing, I just wanted to ask a self-proclaimed top student about climbing walls. Fu Jiao. Almighty, don't you know you'll die if you keep chatting like this? How did it feel to climb walls? His tone sounded like he was talking about the smog today. Fu Jiao coughed lightly. I just took a shortcut. And then you saved a beauty? Qin Mo's voice always sounded especially magnetic and deep in her ears. Fu Jiao touched the bridge of her nose. That was along the way. Along the way, you became the new boss of number 1 middle school? Qin Mo looked at the youngster and lifted his thin lips slightly. Amazing. Fu Jiao smiled evilly and put her arm behind the sofa. What can I do? I'm so handsome after all. Since you're so handsome, I'll check your physics results myself next time. Qin Mo stood up and looked down at the youngster. Then he turned sideways and said to He Honghua, Auntie, since he's here, I'll take him away. If it's too late, let him sleep at my place. Take him away? Fu Jiao was dumbfounded. What was going on? He Honghua was also shocked, but she was shocked by the word sleep. Her expression changed, and she immediately said, No, my Jiao can't spend the night outside. He Honghua's reaction was too big. The whole room fell silent. Even Chen Xiaodong didn't understand why Madame was like this. When Qin Mo turned to look over, only then did He Honghua realize that she had gone overboard. She hurriedly explained, "No, I'm saying that Joe's eyes have just recovered. It's not good to go back and forth like this. Moreover, Joe has classes tomorrow." Coming up with such a reason was putting He Honghua in a difficult position. Her round face blushed as well. Before Fu Jiu could help, Qin Mo replied, "I didn't think it through. Auntie, don't worry. After everything is over, no matter how late it is, I will send him back." Perhaps it had something to do with his birth. Even when Qin Mo said such words, his nobility didn't seem to diminish. But He Honghua was already very happy. The more she looked at this young Master Qin, the more she liked him. Many people didn't want to play with her Jiu, so they all went to the Fu family to play with Fu Shiming. Chapter 401. Fu Jiu really didn't understand. The Almighty just said something soft. Why did her mother push her to the Almighty as if she was a gift? This was really her own mother. Fu Jiu also witnessed the Almighty's charm from a young age to an old age. Her mother turned into an anti-fan in an instant. As soon as Fu Jiu walked out of the door, she said to Qin Mo, "People who don't know would think that you are my mother's son. Obviously, I look more worry-free than you, wall-jumping scholar." Qin Mo tilted his head and looked at the youngster. He raised his hand to unlock the car and raised his chin, indicating for her to get in. Every time she heard the Almighty call her a scholar, Fu Jiu always felt that she couldn't continue this conversation. After the two got in the car, Qin Mo didn't start the car. Instead, he tilted his head and looked at the youngster on his right. Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows. "What?" Qin Mo looked at the youngster who was wearing a black mask, revealing only a pair of eyes. Inexplicably, he found this guy adorable. Fu Jiu saw the playfulness in Qin Mo's smile. Just as she was about to say something, she saw the other person suddenly lean down. The sudden scent of peppermint and sandalwood seemed to invade every cell in the car, slowly spreading in the car. Fu Jiu paused unconsciously. Those thin lips brushed past the side of her face at a subtle distance. His body was very close. Fu Jiu looked at the Almighty who was helping her fasten her seatbelt. His temperament was indifferent, and his side profile was so handsome that it could make people fall head over heels for him. Fu Jiu subconsciously shrank back a little. She didn't completely lose herself in his beauty. After all, at this distance, when the Almighty pulled his hand back, his elbow would easily touch the awkward position in front of her chest. Even with the bandage, she was still worried that the touch would be different. A man's chest was hard, and hers. It was hard to say. When Qin Mo pulled his hand back, he raised his eyebrows. He seemed to be very interested in the way Fu Jiu breathed. Even his thin lips were curved into a smile. Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows. What was the Almighty smiling about? "Hurry up and return to your normal sitting position." Qin Mo didn't move. Fu Jiu simply moved. She leaned over and wanted to blow into his ear. Qin Mo was a step faster than the youngster. He returned to his seat abruptly and glanced sideways. "Behave yourself, understand?" Fu Jiu smiled and winked evilly. Qin Mo didn't bother with this person who always made his emotions fluctuate. He started the car. When the Hummer drove out, the fog in Jiangxing became thicker. Han Susu had never been as jumpy as she was today. She sat up straight and looked outside, then asked her brother and Jiang Zhua if her dress was pretty. Jiang Zhua was a smart person. He raised his eyebrows and smiled. Qin Mo and Fu Jiu walked in one after another. Even Jiang Zhua didn't know why, but he felt that when the two of them stood together, they complemented each other and were equally handsome. After Han Susu saw the young man, her heart beat even faster. She walked up to Fu Jiu and said softly, "Thank you so much for today. You didn't want to tell me your phone number, so I could only contact you through my brother. I'm really sorry for what I said to you before. I hope you can forgive me." It was obvious that Han Susu had put in a lot of effort today. Her perfect makeup and face were indeed eye-catching. Chapter 402. Seeing this, Jiang Zhua smiled at Qin Mo and said in a low voice, "Susu must have fallen for your little brother. She doesn't even want to eat or drink, and she is so shy when she sees you. You know, the two of them are about the same age, so it's quite suitable for them to be together." Suitable? Qin Mo's thin lips were still curled up. He always looked like this, whether it was in the business world or in their daily meetings. His handsome side profile didn't change much. He was noble and domineering, a standard soldier. But this time, Jiang Zhua felt that his smile was a little different, but he couldn't tell what was different if he had to say it. Strangely, the surrounding temperature seemed to have dropped by several degrees all of a sudden. Was it because the heating here wasn't good enough? On the other side, Han Susu was still expressing her regret, hoping that the young man would look at her. Even if it was just a glance. Finally, she got her wish. Fu Jiu looked up and said, "You should thank Brother Mo." Han Susu felt that the young man was super cool, especially when she thought of how he stood in front of her at school. Her heart started to beat erratically again. She automatically ignored the reason why the young man saved her. No matter what, the other party had forgiven her. Han Susu smiled and followed Fu Jiu into the private room happily. Although this meeting was also in an entertainment venue, it wasn't as noisy, and there were many types of alcohol. The sound of piano could be heard outside the private room, and inside, people were singing, steaming, and eating. It was a high-class private club. As soon as they entered, Han Susu pulled the young man to sit by the song selection table. Let them chat like big brothers. What do you want to sing? I'll help you. Fu Jiu glanced at the Almighty, and indeed, the three of them seemed to have something to talk about, so she didn't go over. Qin Mo sat in the dim light, his posture lazy and abstinent. His tie was already untied, and it was crooked. His eyes unconsciously looked at the young man and woman who were ordering songs. He tilted his head and lit a cigarette, as if this was the only way to suppress the inexplicable stuffiness in his chest. The stuffiness came for no reason. Bit by bit, it seeped in, and as the song overflowed, it accumulated more and more. In order to dispel this irritation, Qin Mo turned his head and focused his attention on Han Feng, who was speaking. "Susu, I can't control her anymore." Han Feng glanced at the other side and smiled. "You insisted on making me make this call. It seems that it's not just because you know you're wrong. After being saved by your brother like a hero, even your character has softened a lot." Qin Mo didn't say a word. He raised his hand and drank the wine in the glass, his eyes a little gloomy. It seemed that this was the only way to suppress things that were getting more and more out of control. But reality proved that some things could not be suppressed at all. Han Susu had never been a calm person. She sat there and smiled, asking Fu Jiu what she liked. Qin Mo found the voice a little ear-piercing. Someone once said that the Han family's Missy had a good voice and was very good at singing. It was just that she didn't want to enter the entertainment industry, and the Han family wouldn't allow her to do so. Qin Mo used to think that her voice wasn't bad. But that was not the case today. Especially when the young man turned his head to smile at her. Chapter 403. He was starting to think it wasn't a good idea to agree to bring the youngster here. Qin Mo tried to distract himself again. It was to prevent himself from grabbing the youngster and running away. Suddenly, for some unknown reason, he just hated girls. Any girl who got close to the youngster would be an eyesore. Even Han Susu was the same. And Qin Mo knew very well that many high school students in puberty liked girls like Han Susu. She dressed beautifully and acted coquettishly. Would his little brother like her too? With this in mind, Qin Mo's eyes dimmed. Jiang Zhua seemed to have realized something as he turned to look over. He saw Qin Mo's deep eyes staring at the youngster's side profile. It was so deep that it didn't seem like his usual self. That gaze, Jiang Zhua didn't know why, but his heart skipped a beat. He must be overthinking. Seeing Qin Mo look away without changing his expression, Jiang Zhua thought that he must be overthinking. But Qin Mo had been possessive since he was young. He probably couldn't bear to see the little brother he finally recognized become someone else's. Luckily, Fu Jiu didn't stay with Han Susu for long. After she was done, she walked over and looked at him with a bright smile. "Brother Mo, what do you want to hear?" Looking at that clean and harmless face, his boredom seemed to be dispelled by this kind of light. Qin Mo flicked his cigarette butt and said, "You can sing?" Fu Jiu laughed. "I'm the current school hunk of number 1 middle school. How can I win without some substance?" In fact, when she was still Z, she disguised herself as a resident singer in a bar. Of course, she wouldn't tell this to the Almighty. "Then let's invite the current school hunk to sing what you're best at." The coldness in Qin Mo's eyes dissipated a lot. The current school hunk was a joke. Because the previous school hunk of number 1 middle school was Almighty Qin. Some people even predicted that no school hunk could be more handsome than Almighty Qin, whether it was in the past or the next few decades. Until Fu Jiu appeared. There was even a comparison between the two on the school's internet. But the more they compared, the more the topic went astray, and it became a couple. Fu Jiu found it interesting, but she didn't know what expression the Almighty would have when more and more people said he was gay. Fu Jiu had sung quite a few songs when she was a resident singer. She tilted her head to look at the person sitting on the sofa, the person who had been protecting her since they first met. Her finger slid down and clicked on Mayday's new song. Fu Jiu's singing posture was absolutely professional. Her fingers were on the vertical microphone, and she was sitting on the high chair with a smile on her face. Unlike Qin Mo, Fu Jiu always dressed up for the night. A cool leather jacket paired with a pair of white jeans, silver hair, and pure black earrings. No one would have thought that Fu Jiu was a girl. Just by sitting there, she seemed to be able to generate electricity. She was so handsome that it made people's hearts flutter. Han Susu's gaze was already a little infatuated, and when that young man's unique voice came out, she couldn't take her eyes off Fu Jiu. However, Fu Jiu's eyes were looking at Qin Mo, very lazy and sunny. "I want to write a song about you. I want to keep a cat." He wanted to go back to every scene and slow down every watch. "We build a castle at the corner of children and adults." Chapter 404. Under the light, the silver-haired youngster held the microphone in his hand and looked at Qin Mo with a smile. His thin lips were very close to the microphone, and all the light in the room seemed to be hitting his lips, gathering into dots of light. "Life can't be longer, fireworks fall from the corner of my eyes. The world can't be bigger, you stare at my smile. Among all the passing scenery and people, you treat me the best." Obviously, this song was sung to Qin Mo. Han Feng laughed softly. "Qin Mo, your little brother is really good, he knows everything." Qin Mo didn't speak, still holding the wine glass in his hand. Rather than saying that he didn't speak, it was more accurate to say that the moment the youngster opened his mouth, his eyes never left Fu Jiu's body. Even he didn't know what kind of expression he had when he looked at Fu Jiu. Hidden in the darkness, as if no one else was around, he wanted to take her for himself. Jiang Zhua watched from the side. His heart that had been thumping just now began to sink. Qin Mo had never looked at anyone like that. Was he thinking too much, or did Qin Mo really have feelings for Fu Jiu? Jiang Zhua was a smart man. Unlike Qin Mo, he majored in medicine and had seen many people in that circle. He was more sensitive to such things than Qin Mo. Plus, the onlooker saw things more clearly, so he could see things more clearly. Good brother? Which older brother would look at his younger brother like that? Jiang Zhua also knew that some people weren't really gay. Sometimes, it was because their personalities were too similar, and they were always together. Plus, the youngster's face was so handsome that he could ignore his gender. Qin Mo didn't mind being nice to him. So Jiang Zhua was still hesitating if he should point it out. Because if he said it, Qin Mo might think in that direction, and then he would really be gay. He couldn't bear the consequences of the Qin family ending without descendants. But if he didn't say it, and the situation continued. Qin Mo and Fu Jiu. Wait a minute, why did he always think that his friend was more likely to be gay in the future? Thinking of this, Jiang Zuo was also depressed. He wanted to get the wine glass. Qin Mo turned his face and met his eyes, which made Jiang Zuo pause. After all, his friend's indifferent eyes seemed to be able to see through his thoughts. The Han siblings had no idea what was going on. Han Feng was still puzzled. Hey! What's wrong with you two? Why are you looking at each other? Nothing, Qin Mo replied faintly. Han Feng lifted a brow at Jiang Zuo. Really? Jiang Zuo laughed and said, what else could it be? I just think that Fu Jiu's singing is pretty good. Now that he is the school hunk, us former seniors are all standing behind him. Not only does it sound good, it looks good too. Han Feng lowered his voice and moved closer to the two. I'm going to be busy now. Look at Susu. She's about to confess her love in public. She's so infatuated. When Jiang Zuo heard this, he would definitely join in the fun. But ever since he saw Qin Mo's gaze, he subconsciously turned to the left. He hadn't noticed it the previous few times. Chapter 405. Han Susu was still watching Fu Jiu walk down from the stage with a pink face. She didn't notice the change in her surroundings. It could be said that Han Susu had never felt such a thing for anyone in her entire life. She really wanted to see the other party. Even if the other party only said a few words to her and stood beside her. She felt like her heart didn't belong to her. Ever since she was young, she had been surrounded by rich and powerful people. Their looks and temperaments were always superior. The elder brothers of the Qin family and the Jiang family were much more outstanding than their peers. She used to like Big Brother Qin. But she knew very well that once she crossed his bottom line, she wouldn't even be able to get close to him. So she didn't like him anymore. But even if she didn't like him, she still looked down on other people. Those in school couldn't even be compared to these brothers she knew. Until yesterday at number 1 middle school. Han Susu finally felt that there was someone who wouldn't try to please her because of her family background. The young man was very cold to her from beginning to end, and he didn't talk much. But it was that coldness that made Han Susu feel that he was the one she was looking for. So Han Susu threw away her previous arrogance. When Fu Jiu finished singing, she went up and grabbed Fu Jiu's arm. I ordered a duet. You sing the guy and I'll sing the girl. I'm sure you'll like it. Fu Jiu frowned. She usually thought girls were cute, but in fact, she didn't like it when someone approached her so directly. The Almighty was familiar with her, so it wasn't a big deal to touch her. An unfamiliar person. Fu Jiu almost flung Han Susu's hand away in a moment of reflex. You sing first. Han Susu's cheeks were pink. No matter what other people thought, she liked the feeling of standing side by side with the young man. Forget it, since she was the sister of the Almighty's friend. With this thought in mind, Fu Jiu put one hand in her pocket and took the microphone from Han Susu. She was about to sing when a gust of wind blew towards her, and the microphone was pulled out from behind. It was Qin Mo. Fu Jiu wasn't the only one who looked back. Even Han Susu stopped and was stunned. Big Brother Qin. His eyes aren't good. He needs to go home and rest early. Qin Mo's voice was calm, but he was still the chosen one. Just by standing there, he seemed to be able to move. His aura of nobility lingered and he was incomparably domineering. I won't be singing anymore. Han Susu opened her mouth. It's only 9 o'clock. The smog is heavy and it will irritate my eyes if I'm late. Qin Mo tilted his head and looked at Han Susu. At that moment, Han Susu didn't know why, but she felt that his gaze was a little cold. But because that face was too handsome and noble, Han Susu couldn't see anything. On the other hand, Jiang's heart sank when he saw Qin Mo extinguish his cigarette and walk over. Han Susu didn't want the youngster to leave. However, Qin Mo had already opened his mouth. Get dressed. This sentence was directed at Fujiu. Fujiu smiled and didn't say anything. She casually pulled over her jacket and zipped it up. Qin Mo took the pure black mask from the side and asked Fujiu to put it on. Then he nodded at Jiang Zhua and Han Feng, who were standing on the sofa, indicating that they should leave first. Han Feng still wanted to say something. Qin Mo had already taken the youngster out of the private room. What? What's going on? Han Feng was really confused. Why are you in such a hurry to go home? Jiang Zhua didn't speak. He looked at the microphone that Qin Mo had placed on the coffee table. His eyes changed, and no one knew what he was thinking. Han Susu was quite considerate of Fujiu. Didn't you hear what Brother Qin said? Fujiu's eyes are not good, so he needs to go back and rest early. Brother, you heard his singing just now, right? Isn't it very nice? Yes, 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 look at how obsessed you are. Why? Now you don't chase after your brother Qin and brother Jiang, but this little brat? Han Feng was still joking. I don't know who said that she doesn't like people of the same age. In her eyes, those high school students are all like children. They are not mature at all. Could it be that this one is very mature? Brother. Han Susu pinched Han Feng and said while pacing, who are you calling a little brat? You haven't seen him fight, he's so handsome. Also, he is different from the people in school, he is very mature. Otherwise, Brother Qin wouldn't recognize him as his little brother. Do you think someone who Brother Qin likes is bad? Huh? He is at the level of a male god. I thought only those Tahan Appas on TV were your male gods. They are not as handsome as him. You will know when you see him fight. Han Susu's heart skipped a beat when she thought of the scene at the school gate today. Han Feng laughed. That's strange. If he is so good at fighting, why does Qin Mo protect his little brother like a doll? When Jiang Zhua heard this, his fingers paused. He was still thinking about something else. But Han Feng turned around and said to him, Zhua, you have always been smarter than us, what do you think? Jiang Zhua first looked at Han Susu's blushing face and then at Han Feng's face. He knew very well that he couldn't say his guess. Especially not to let Han Susu know. Fujiu is also a member of the Supreme Alliance. There are only 2 days left before the National League, and the condition of their eyes is very important to them. When Jiang Zhua said this, he didn't believe it himself. But it didn't matter whether he believed it or not. It was fine as long as the Han siblings believed it. But before he left, Jiang Zhua still said, Han Feng, tell Susu to give up. It is obvious that Fujiu doesn't like her, and this is not a good match. He doesn't like someone like my sister? Han Feng found it funny. Then what kind of person does he like? Jiang Zhua really wanted to say that the key was not what kind of person the young man liked, but whether Qin Mo would make him like someone. But in the end, he held back and put out the cigarette. Anyway, listen to me. Don't let Susu find Fujiu, and don't even think about asking Qin Mo to ask him out. Han Feng saw that he was serious, so he took it to heart. But it was difficult to stop his sister from finding Fujiu. Everyone present today should be able to tell that his sister has already fallen in love with him. It seemed that a man who was too handsome could also be a source of trouble. The darker the night, the heavier the haze. The visibility outside was extremely low. So Qin Mo didn't drive very fast. When the domineering Land Rover drove past, it always attracted people's attention. Chapter 406. He thought that he finally understood what Mr. Li meant when he said that his brother would one day be snatched away by some unknown woman. It was very uncomfortable. Especially when he saw that the youngster was going to sing with Su, that feeling became even more obvious. Although Qin Mo told himself that he couldn't do this. The youngster wasn't his only possession. He wasn't like those toys he used to fancy. He was a real person. Even so, Chin Mo didn't want to see a similar scene in front of him again. To him, the youngster was just a high school student. The rebellious period of youth was the most vulnerable to external temptations. He was the older brother, so he naturally couldn't let him go astray. Puppy love? That was even more impossible. But what if the youngster really met someone he liked? Would he still stop him? Chin Mo didn't know why, but when he thought of that scene, his chest felt like it was being pressed by a huge rock. It wasn't very painful, and it wouldn't hurt that much. It was just that the pressure made him want to destroy something. Chin Mo thought that he might make a move, even though he knew that it was wrong. But at the same time, he was very clear that the youngster wouldn't do anything to him for a woman. But once he made a move, some things couldn't go back. Chin Mo looked sideways at the youngster with his head tilted. It was probably because the temperature in the car was too comfortable that Fujio felt a little sleepy as soon as she got in. Plus, the Almighty had a calming aura. So Fujio was basically asleep now, but her head was still nodding. Her white pointed chin was exposed, and the black jacket had a circle of fluff around it. Even when he was asleep, he was still extremely handsome. No wonder so many girls liked this guy. Chin Mo parked the car outside the Fu family's villa, but he didn't drive in immediately. Instead, he turned sideways and unbuckled the youngster's seatbelt. He looked down at Fujio, but he didn't retract his arm immediately. Fujio sensed that someone was approaching. But she subconsciously knew that she was in the Almighty's car, and nothing would happen. So she didn't wake up. Instead, she leaned forward as if she were on a plane. Her head fell forward, and she leaned into Chin Mo's side arms. Chin Mo could have easily pushed the youngster away, but he maintained that position and didn't retract his body. Instead, he moved his left hand and held the youngster's face, straightening him up. Fujio moved a little and even slowly found a more comfortable position in his arms. She rested the side of her face on his palm, looking very obedient. Like a cat with its claws removed, it was still handsome, but it was also very silly. His silver hair was still curled up. The soft and delicate side profile made contact with his palms, giving him the illusion that his palms were being burned by light. The youngster's soft and delicate face, and the touch made him feel as if his palm was burning. Because of this action, the previous stuffy feeling seemed to disappear in an instant. Chin Mo lowered his eyes, the reflection of the silver vortex in his deep eyes. Chin Mo's Mo had thought. Didn't Chin. Even if didn't belong to him. Since he was her younger brother, why should she let those girls snatch him away? Chin Mo raised his hand and ran his fingers through the youngster's silver hair. His expression was cold and noble, like a demon in the dark. Chin Mo raised his hand and ran his fingers through the youngster's silver hair. His expression was cold and noble, like a demon in the dark. He ran to the front of the car. Just as he was about to say something, he saw his young master. His young master was throwing himself at young Master Chin. Just as he was about to say something, he saw his young master actually throwing himself into young Master Chin's arms. At this moment, Chen Xiaodong was invigorated. The smog didn't shock him at all. Nothing could shock him as much as this. No matter how big the blow was, it wouldn't be as shocking as this. Young master, how hard is he going to take things? He is challenging Almighty Chin's endurance time and time again. Chen Xiaodong opened his mouth wide at the stupid scene in the car. Chin Mo saw everything. His deep eyes looked up and met Chen Xiaodong's. His gaze was filled with an oppressive warning. Chen Xiaodong was about to make a sound, but it was stuck in his throat. When he saw Almighty Chin put his slender fingers in between his lips, signaling him to be quiet, Chen Xiaodong could only stand outside the car, not knowing whether to stay or leave. Only then did he realize that his young master was just asleep. Chen Xiaodong heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed like he was overthinking. Of course, the premise was that his young master didn't pretend to be asleep. But Almighty Qin was a bit too gentle, wasn't he? At that moment, Chen Xiaodong remembered the bed photos on Weibo. His eyes widened again. Don't tell me that these two people are already dating. Did Almighty Qin really get turned gay by his young master? Chen Xiaodong was still shocked. On the other side, Qin Mo had already made his move. He retracted his body and pushed open the car door. Then he went around to Fu Jiu's side and opened the door on the right. Chen Xiaodong just watched, because he didn't know what to say anymore. Qin Mo bent down with his slender legs and leaned into the car. He put one hand on the side of Fu Jiu's body, and the other hand under Fu Jiu's knees. Almighty Qin wanted to carry his young master out. After realizing this, Chen Xiaodong wanted to say something again. But he couldn't resist Almighty Qin's aura. Just as Qin Mo's breath brushed past Fu Jiu's cheeks and his fingers were about to press above her waist, Fu Jiu suddenly opened her eyes and reached out to hold the man's wrist. Qin Mo stopped and raised his eyebrows at the young man. Fu Jiu yawned lazily. I fell asleep. Slept all the way. Seeing that the young man was awake, Qin Mo naturally retracted his hand and straightened his back. Get out of the car. Put on your coat and mask. Fu Jiu nodded and lowered her head, pretending to fix her mask. In fact, she was relieved. If she hadn't woken up just now, the Almighty would have carried her all the way home. She didn't know what would have happened. That place was getting more and more disobedient lately. The Almighty never thought that she was a girl because it was safer to wear thick clothes. Unlike Summer, it was easy to see through her disguise. But no matter how safe the clothes were, others might not be able to detect it. But if it was the Almighty, Fu Jiu lowered her head and looked at the area above her waist. He would definitely be suspicious if he pressed on it. This cross-dressing thing couldn't be delayed for long. In the past, Fu Jiu hadn't matured yet. Now that she had matured, and after the National League, spring would come after the end of the year. By then, she would be wearing thin clothes. Chapter 407. Fu Jiu sat up straight before getting out of the car. Qin Mo had already noticed that the young man was extremely afraid of the cold, so when Fu Jiu came out, he naturally reached out his hand and zipped up the young man's jacket. Fu Jiu was wearing a mask. She lowered her eyes to look at the fingers that were tidying up her collar, and a faint smile could be seen at the corner of her eyes. In short, from Chen Xiaodong's point of view, his young master had never been so obedient. And Almighty Qin's eyes were lowered, and his black hair fell down. His side profile was so handsome that it was easy to have dirty thoughts. As if his young master was his possession. Chen Xiaodong shook his head, trying not to let his imagination run wild. Fu Jiu didn't think much of it. The Almighty had always been considerate, so she always had the urge to raise an Almighty at home. Unfortunately, Fu Jiu studied Qin Mo's face again and didn't know what to do. Is it nice to stare at me all the time? The Almighty's tone was very indifferent. His eyes were clearly looking at her collar, but he could even sense that she was up to no good. Fu Jiu smiled. Yes, we are the super handsome team. I thought you would say the top student team. Qin Mo took back his left hand and put it in his pocket. He stood tall with his deep eyes and raised eyebrows, which was very demoralizing. Fu Jiu. She couldn't let go of the title of top student. Change the topic. Let's go in for a cup of tea. Fu Jiu rarely invited people. Qin Mo didn't agree. He was a little absent-minded. Nah, go to bed early. Okay, see you tomorrow. Fu Jiu turned her head and glanced at her little butler. Chen Xiaodong quivered immediately and followed her. What made him look back was that Almighty Qin didn't leave immediately. Instead, he leaned against the Land Rover and seemed to be lighting a cigarette. His eyes seemed to be looking in their direction. Fu Jiu sensed it too. She turned around and pointed at her mask at Qin Mo. Qin Mo raised his eyebrows. Fu Jiu pointed at his right pocket. Qin Mo touched it, and his back trembled. The young man had left a mask for him when he wasn't paying attention. This guy. Qin Mo looked at the young man with bright eyes and white teeth in the distance, and the corner of his mouth slowly curled up. Then, in the fog, his eyes were cold and vicious, and a little deep. So, why would he give up such a good brother to someone else? After Fu Jiu's figure disappeared into the night, Qin Mo got into the car. He took the mask out of his pocket and placed it in front of the steering wheel. At that time, the two of them didn't know that there would be such a storm in the unregulated official bar. The rumors against Fu Jiu started in the wee hours of the morning. The Spade fans who didn't know right from wrong started to be led astray. Quite a number of them started to become fans of the road or anti-fans. Official bar was different from official Weibo. If such a thing had happened on the official Weibo account, Manager Feng would have received the news immediately. On the other side of the bar, it was an hour later that Agent Feng received the call. A large number of posts were discussing Spade Z's shortcomings. Some people even started to use Spade Z's name to create groups to trick fans, while the fans who really defended Spade Z were scolded as white lotuses. Some of them took the opportunity to gain popularity, while others felt wronged because of what they had done previously. All of a sudden, all of them rushed out to criticize Spade Z. But that was not the point. Chapter 408. It was 4:00 in the morning when Feng Yi realized the seriousness of the situation. The country wasn't as open as overseas. In some aspects, many people still couldn't accept it. For example, if Qin Mo and Fu Jiu were flirting with each other, it was okay, but if one of them really liked men, that group of fans was bound to be ostracized. Plus this time, the number of posts was too many. Everyone on the internet knew that there were people in the entertainment industry who specialized in raising anti-fans. These anti-fans would attack as long as they were hired. What made Feng Yi angry was who had done such a thing. There must be someone who could profit from this. The only positive measure he could do was to tell the Big V not to leave. But in the face of profit, some people didn't care. They would touch the edge of the topic if they could. 7:00 in the morning. The bad comments couldn't be controlled and exploded on the official Weibo. Some people from small teams started to stir the water. What was so disgusting? How could there be such a person who liked men? Someone even wrote, "I won't disband Spade Z's fan group since there are people joining." In other words, she was going to continue to use Spade Z's popularity to deceive people. But some people didn't have good judgment and couldn't understand the situation. Some people with bad intentions argued that they didn't use Spade Z's popularity. But the evidence was clear. Their group was created in Spade Z's name and many people were tricked into joining. Since morning, Feng Yi's phone hadn't stopped ringing. All of them were asking him if the post was true. Was Spade Z really gay? Feng Yi didn't let the situation get any worse. But he was very clear that the situation wasn't going well. But what calmed him down was Qin Mo's call. "What's going on?" Qin Mo's voice was still very calm, but there was a layer of coldness hidden in it. After Feng Yi controlled the situation, he said, "Someone exposed the fact that little Spade used to chase a man in school, and some people criticized him for many things after he entered the Supreme Alliance. They want Supreme Alliance to have peace. Then tell them that Supreme Alliance belongs to the Qin group, not anyone else." Qin Mo's side profile was indifferent, but his ruthlessness was bone-chilling. "Supreme Alliance will always have a place for Spade Z. We will live and die together." Feng Yi paused. "Do we really have to be so tough?" Qin Mo didn't say anything. Even through the phone, he could feel the coldness. Feng Yi understood what he meant. He cleared his throat with difficulty. "I'll make a statement now." "It's not just a statement." Qin Mo's eyes seemed to be overflowing with black fog. When his black trench coat was rolled up, he looked like his character in the game, the Grim Reaper. This time, drag out everyone involved. At the headquarters of the Jiang group, Jiang Zhuo arched a brow. That's the reason you came over for tea so early in the morning? Yes. Qin Mo's gaze was cold. Where is he? Jiang Zhua sighed. You called me at 7 in the morning and I set it up for you. Chapter 409. On the Fu family's side. Chen Xiaodong wouldn't let Fu Jiu go to school no matter what. Smart as she was, Fu Jiu quickly sensed that something was wrong. She put her hand on Chen Xiaodong's shoulder. Tell me, what's the matter? No, I'm fine. Chen Xiaodong's eyes were still avoiding eye contact. He really didn't want his young master to hear those remarks. Fu Jiu curled up her lips. Is it about school? What can happen to the school? Chen Xiaodong didn't realize that he had been tricked. Fu Jiu said, that's the team's problem. Chen Xiaodong, give me the tablet. Fu Jiu stretched out her hand, looking very handsome. Chen Xiaodong hugged him tightly. You, Almighty Qin said you can't look at these electronic products. My eyes are fine now. Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows. Give it to me. Chen Xiaodong shook his head. Fu Jiu smiled. You don't want to give it to me? You want me to molest you? Chen Xiaodong's eyes widened. How could young master do this? Even if he was good-looking, young master couldn't eat the grass by his side. Fu Jiu took advantage of this opportunity to take the tablet from Chen Xiaodong's arms. She previewed very quickly. It was almost 10 lines at a glance. Chen Xiaodong comforted Fu Jiu. Young master, don't take these words too seriously. What do these people know? I'm going to the internet cafe. Fu Jiu didn't wait for Chen Xiaodong to finish and threw the tablet back into his hands. Chen Xiaodong couldn't stop him even if he wanted to. And this time, Fu Jiu didn't go to Yin Wuyao's. Instead, she went to a smaller and closer restaurant. Not leaving a trace in the same place was her usual style of doing things. Even the Almighty didn't know about this. Boss, turn on a computer. This time, Fu Jiu didn't even reveal her face and hair color. She wore a black coat with a hood and just sat in the corner of the sofa. Fu Jiu didn't attack immediately. Instead, she opened Dazzle Dance as a cover. In other words, even if someone passed by behind her, they would only see that she was dazzling. He didn't know what else she had done besides Dazzle Dance. Fu Jiu put on her headphones and placed her hands on the porcelain white keyboard. Da-da-da. The crisp typing sound was like a rapid note, without the slightest pause. For ordinary people, many things might be difficult to distinguish on the internet. Because behind the layers of nicknames, you don't know who that person is. But to Fu Jiu, it was just an IP code. No matter how many times the other party changed their nicknames, they would be able to lock onto their true identity by hacking into their IP address. It was impossible to say that he was not affected. Even Fu Jiu understood why the Almighty was paying attention to her. She, who walked in the dark all year round, could not tolerate the darkness. There was no such thing as absolute white in this world. However, in the dead of night, she couldn't help but want to get it done once and for all. Like killing people. So, she was dangerous. Fu Jiu chuckled and thought of the man's side profile as he fixed her collar with his eyes lowered. You can't make mistakes, right? However, he couldn't let him off easily either. Causing trouble on the internet? Don't you know whose territory this is? Fu Jiu held the lollipop in her mouth. You guys should thank the Almighty. If it wasn't for his beauty, all of you would have gone to hell to accompany the King of Hell. If Hoshino was here at this moment, he would definitely recognize Fu Jiu. On the screen, the white code kept jumping, and the eagle penetrated the firewall. Chapter 410. 9 o'clock. There was a lot of negative news on the official Weibo. Spade Z's departure from Supreme Alliance had become a hot topic. Some fans of other members also started to leave comments after being incited. Dada, you have to stay away from Spade Z, or else I won't be your fan anymore. Lin Feng, Yunhu, Feng Shang, Yin Wuyao, and even Shui Yaoyao's official Weibo all had similar comments. Shui Yaoyao's eyes turned red with anger when she saw those comments. She felt sorry for the young man. She had nothing in this group of people. But because she had nothing, she didn't care. There were no words, but words. She posted a Weibo with the title, "The Spade Z You Don't Understand." After clicking on the link, Shui Yaoyao's voice could be heard, very gentle and real. I was a very fat girl since I was young. I wasn't popular in school, and I was even ostracized. I was slandered as a thief. If it wasn't for a young man who appeared and told the public that justice might come late, but it would never be absent, I would still be carrying the crime of a thief for the rest of my life. I'm so glad that he appeared. When someone disliked me for being fat and didn't want to play with me, when everyone laughed at me, this young man used his gentle strength to take me to the esports selection contest and completed the dream that I could never achieve in my life. I think that is the life I want. If Spade Z leaves Supreme Alliance, I will leave too, because my dream was given by him. Count me in. Feng Shang quickly followed, and when he reposted Shui Yaoyao's Weibo, he sent a very low voice. Actually, I'm very, very afraid to speak to everyone in this way. You guys should have heard it, I stutter. Because of this problem, there are many things that I don't dare to do, until I met my idol. He said that stuttering is nothing, it's very, very cute. And, he also likes to call me Baby Feng. If there are people who, because of my relationship with him, they won't be fans anymore, then so be it. Yin Wuyao sat in front of the computer with a cigarette in his mouth. He was the least talkative. I came back because someone told me, so what if I'm old? I can still shock the esports world when I'm old. Since this person is going to be forced out, then I'll come back to be the boss of my internet cafe. The voices of the three of them really brought a lot of shock to the fans. Many people were asking if they were wrong. But how could the Cali team ask them to lower their voices at this time? He immediately sent a message using his alternate account. Supreme Alliance will not be threatened by you. You are just 3 rookies and you have so much to say. Never in their wildest dreams would they have thought that as soon as they said those words, Yunhu and Lin Feng sent a voice message at the same time, using the same official Weibo. Yun Feng couple. *CK your grandpa, they're obviously the Feng Yun couple. Lin Feng was still unconvinced. Chapter 411. We live and die together. Just how good was this team member to make all the team members say such words? Even at the expense of offending the fans. The Cali team was dumbfounded when they saw the situation. In their eyes, there were many things to consider, especially the feelings of the fans. But how dare the other side go this far? They had indeed miscalculated. How could the Supreme Alliance be an ordinary team that would not stick to their morals just because they were afraid of offending the fans? Funny. It wasn't easy for them to be standing here. Because it wasn't easy, they had a bottom line. As Yunhu said, if a team couldn't even be grateful, then the team was finished. Mountains and rivers. The National League. They must go together, no one missing. Because of this voice message, the wind on the internet began to change. People's hearts were made of flesh. Even if they couldn't see right from wrong, they would still be moved by the Supreme Alliance's behavior. The members of the Cali team threw the mouse and were still indignant. Damn it, that Spade Z was almost killed. Should we post another thread? Just as the other person was about to speak, a voice suddenly rang out. No one knew what happened to the internet celebrities in the industry. But at the same time, they posted on Weibo. The title of the Weibo was the same, "Come and see what the Cali team's alternate accounts have done." Almost instantly, this Weibo post was reposted like crazy. How could they not repost it? The same IP was divided into many accounts. First, they pretended to be Spade fans and posted on the official forum. After that, they changed to another account and complained that their posts were deleted. Even the fake Spade fan group was created by them. Why did everyone know so clearly? Because the publisher was very considerate. When posting the pictures, he marked everyone with the same IP address with a red arrow. The most shocking thing was that there was a voice message on it. The content of the voice message was, "Damn it, that Spade Z was so close to dying. Should we post again?" It was a clear conversation, and even the voice could be heard. It wasn't like the Cali team hadn't broadcast before. Even if their fans wanted to speak up for them, they didn't have the face to say anything. He had been caught red-handed. The two members of the Cali team didn't know that their computers had been hacked. They didn't know about this Weibo post until someone commented on them. The moment they heard the voice message, their faces turned pale. "Who is it? Who recorded my voice?" One of them subconsciously shouted. But when she looked back, everyone here was their content staff. How could they possibly harm themselves? Then how did this voice recording get released? At this time, in an internet cafe street on West Street. The black-masked youth's fingers flew across the keyboard, and several computers around her entered a state of attack. Even the owner of the internet cafe didn't know when his machines had been charged and started operating. How strange. As his voice fell, Fujio put on the hood of her coat and stood up from the chair. Chapter 412. F***CK. The owner of the internet cafe didn't know what was going on. He kept hitting the computer mainframe. Fujio had already walked out of the alley. The trend on the internet had completely changed. But the Cali team was shameless to the extreme. They didn't want to admit it even after being exposed. Maybe they were confident that they wouldn't be responsible for what they said on the internet. But was it true? Not necessarily. Don't treat everyone as fools. Some people were indeed confused. But that was only a very small number of people who had bad values. Under the trend, everyone asked the Cali team to come out and apologize. They used my Big Spade's name to build a fan group. They said they were supporting me, but they were actually slandering me. Who gave you the right to be so arrogant? One person with multiple accounts just to make my Big Spade leave the Supreme Alliance. What a good scheme. Such a team doesn't have the qualifications to participate in the national competition. What a sharp contrast. Look at the Supreme Alliance and then look at you. You are all esports players. Can't you just play games? Why do you have to harm others? Upstairs, you don't understand. First, they used Spade to attract fans, and then they drove Spade away. In the end, they were the ones who benefited. I saw the screenshot and listened to the recording. How despicable. I only have one word for the Cali team. Get out. The girls who refused to admit it didn't even dare to turn on their computers after being bombarded with comments. What's wrong with this group of people? I also saw that they are not Spade Z's fans. Does this have anything to do with them? Only an idiot would ask such a question. Perhaps the Cali team would never understand it. Anything that touched the bottom line, people would always stand on the side of justice. It didn't need anyone to organize it, and it didn't need to be anyone's fan. It was human nature. Who didn't have a passionate heart? Except for Lioli and the others. Captain, what should we do now? If this goes on, my live broadcast tomorrow will be terrible. Things had come to this point, and there were still people thinking about her live broadcast. Lioli's eyes were gloomy. After all, she had always been the queen of otaku. She had never been scolded like this. It was all because of Spade Z. That recording. How did it come out? Thinking of this, Azure threw the mouse heavily. A loud bang was heard. The whole club fell silent. The members didn't dare to speak. Lioli took a deep breath, fiddled with her long hair, and said, "Apologize." Apologize? How could he apologize for such a thing? Once they apologized, they wouldn't be able to compete anymore, right? Lioli looked at the faces of the whole team and said slowly, now that things have happened, someone has to take responsibility. Since we accidentally said something wrong and were caught red-handed, we should apologize publicly for the sake of the Cali team. At this moment, the entire team finally understood what their captain meant. What Lioli meant was that whoever released the recording on Weibo should apologize. In other words, they had to sacrifice the two of them for the benefit of the entire team? The two girls who hated Fujio so much just now were stunned. They couldn't believe their ears. Captain, you were the one who said we could. Chapter 413. Then, she glanced at the whole team. I think everyone has the same idea as me. After all, the National League is coming. Or do you want all of us to leave with you? That's impossible. Yes, impossible. Someone walked over and said, go and apologize if you're so careless. That's right. Don't drag us down. We still have to compete. The two girls really couldn't describe their feelings at this time. They never thought that their team members would use the method they used on Spade Z to deal with them. It was obvious that everyone had done this together. Why did they say that they were dragging everyone down? Just because their voices were recorded? You. I won't apologize. One of the girls shouted, if you want to apologize, everyone should apologize together. Lioli stood at the side, her face expressionless. That's not up to you. Turn on the computer, the accounts should be automatically logged in. At this moment, the two girls realized that they had to do it. Because, from the moment the accident happened, not only their captain, but also their teammates who were good friends had decided to make them the scapegoats to take the whole thing. That's right, how could they have forgotten? Not all teams were like Supreme Alliance, able to live and die together. Lioli had a good plan. After the two team members released the news, she went on Shangguan Weibo. Only then did she go on Shangguan Weibo. The statement read, there is a problem with the Cali battle team. As the captain, I also have some responsibility. I didn't realize in time that there would be such people around me. Now, I have removed the problematic members from the Cali battle team. I have also set up evidence. It had to be said that Lioli's move was beautiful. Because soon, there would be people comforting her. Even some of Spade Z's fans felt that she didn't have any responsibility for this. This attitude was very good. But was it really like this? Obviously not. But Lioli still missed one point. Yun, who had already said in the message that Almighty Qin was busy with other things. Since he had decided to make a move, of course, he wouldn't let it go. It was almost 10 o'clock. In a Starbucks coffee shop in a shopping mall. A person was still looking down at his phone and computer. He seemed to specialize in this industry. The Weibo page was still open on the screen. However, his mind wasn't on that at the moment. The direction of the internet had already begun to change. No matter how hard he tried to pull it back, it would be difficult. It was all that Shui Yaoyao's fault. When she wrote that paragraph, many people would resonate with her. That would be wasting the best opportunity to attack. However, what puzzled him the most was the message that he had posted on his Weibo. He had been paid to spread Spade Z's information. Why would they post something about the Cali squad? During those 5 minutes, he couldn't log into his account no matter how hard he tried. It was the same for his friends. All of them showed abnormalities. What was going on? Even if he wanted to help the Cali team, he could not. That was his boss. However, his boss was pretty good, especially Captain Luli, who knew how to speak. Pushing two people out to appease the anger of the masses was the right thing to do. Looking at the storm on the official Weibo account that had basically subsided. The man picked up the phone and glanced at it. Strange, why isn't the big client here yet? As soon as he finished speaking, there was a swoosh. The chair in front of him was pulled out. Chapter 4:14. The moment the man looked up, he wanted to run. But how could Chin Mo let him run? Almost as soon as he stood up, someone pressed his back. Sit down. It was the Chin family's bodyguards. These people were all from the army. Even though they were wearing black coats, young master's identity was too special. Not only because he was the only son of the Chin family, but also because young master couldn't be hurt. This was a top-secret order from the inside. And the man didn't know about this. But even so, deep in his heart, he was still afraid of the man in front of him. Chin Mo looked much more elegant. He sat there with his long legs crossed. He took off his black gloves and said with a light smile, "Who gave you the courage to go against Supreme Alliance and Spade Z?" Huh. Young Master Chin, this is a misunderstanding. It must be a misunderstanding. How would I dare to go against Supreme Alliance? Of course, the man wanted to deny it. Chin Mo tilted his head and smiled. Misunderstanding? Then let's talk about the law. Article 246 of our country's criminal law states that anyone who publicly insults others or fabricates facts to slander others, even on the internet, will be sentenced to up to 3 years in prison if the circumstances are serious. Hearing the famous young Master Chin recite a law without missing a word, that person felt a chill run down his spine. Chin Mo casually added, "Do you want to go to jail?" I really didn't. The man still refused to admit it. Chin Mo played with his silver lighter in his hand and glanced at the bodyguard with a light smile. The bodyguard raised his hand and punched the man in the stomach. Ugh! The man's whole body curled up in pain. Chin Mo was still like a rich young master drinking coffee. Using Spade Z's popularity to create a group to attract fans. Internet fraud carries a sentence of up to 15 years in prison. How long do you think you will stay in prison if you are charged with all these crimes? The man subconsciously refuted, "I didn't create the group." They asked if I could do something. Just as he said this, the man realized that he had fallen into young Master Chin's trap. They? Chin Mo lowered his eyes, and even the corner of his mouth was cold. Cali team. The man was really scared because he had never seen young Master Chin like this. He was so scared that even his voice was trembling. Yes, it's them, but now someone has come out to apologize. Finding 2 scapegoats is an apology? Chin Mo was just sitting there, but the pressure was strong. It seems like you don't know me well enough. The moment he finished speaking, the bodyguard immediately understood and punched the man's stomach again. The man was in so much pain that he broke out in a cold sweat. He begged, "Young Master Chin, I'll tell you everything. I was just paid to do things for them." The real mastermind was Lioli, the captain of the Cali battle team. If he continued to fight like this, he would be beaten to death. Chin Mo glanced sideways and listened to the man's words. His eyes darkened, but his voice was calm. In your line of work, there should be records of transactions. That person hadn't expected Chin Mo to be able to guess this. His eyes were filled with panic. Chin Mo arched a brow, his lips cold. That person was afraid that young Master Chin would make another move, so he hurriedly took out his phone. "I'll send a screenshot of the transaction." On the other side, Luli looked at the comforting comments under the official Weibo account, and the corners of her mouth curled up. Chapter 4:15. That was a chat record between her and an internet hacker. It was clearly written that she wanted to hire him to deal with Spade Z, and there was also the payment amount. Lioli never thought that the person she had worked with for more than half a year would keep this kind of thing and post it on the internet. The moment she saw that screenshot, Lioli felt that it was over. She was really over. Even a few people who had no sense of right and wrong were comforting her. However, they were no match for more righteous people. This had angered the public. Even the National League's organizing committee made a statement. In response to the fact that some teams used bad means to slander others, the organizing committee has decided to disqualify all members of the Cali team. Esports is supposed to be a place where strength speaks, not these shameful thoughts. Disqualify all members. That meant that even if they were no longer in the Cali team and went to other places, they could no longer participate. At this moment, the club was completely silent. Everyone slumped down in their seats, their faces pale. Especially Lioli, she was so angry that her first reaction was to call that person. "Hey, what the hell is wrong with you? Don't you have any professional ethics, F? I'm Chin Mo, just 4 words, and Lioli's voice was stuck in her throat. Almighty Chin, how? How could it be him? Lioli's face was drained of all color in an instant. There was no situation more embarrassing than this. Everything she did was for this man. But now it was also this man who dealt with her, and he knew all her dirty side. Lioli almost felt that the man did it on purpose, purposely picking up her call. Listen, this is just the beginning. Chin Mo wouldn't talk to this kind of woman. He hung up the phone and threw it back on the wooden table. That person smiled fawningly. Young Master Chin, look, I told you it was all because of her. Chin Mo glanced at him. Arrest him and take him to the police station. Young Master Chin. That person's eyes were wide open, and he still wanted to struggle. Chin Mo had already stood up and walked out. Jiang Zuo was standing outside. When he saw Chin Mo walk over, he extinguished his cigarette. Even though he knew it wasn't the right time to ask, he couldn't help but ask, don't you think you're too nice to Fuzhou? He's my younger brother. Who else would I be good to if not my younger brother? Chin Mo turned his head and looked at his good friend with a deep gaze. Jiang Zuo's expression turned serious. You know I'm not talking about that kind of good. Chin Mo paused, looking deeply into Jiang Zuo's eyes. That won't happen, we will only be brothers. That's good. Jiang Zuo looked much more relaxed. As long as Chin Mo could confirm that his position in the relationship wasn't wrong, everything would be fine. After all, it wasn't easy to take detours. But, it was very strange. Why didn't the main character appear today? It wasn't that Fuzhou didn't show up, but she showed up at the most suitable place for her to appear, Fu's company. The top floor was where the shareholders' meeting was held. Today, the Fu's enterprise was bustling with activity. In Su Mei's words, everyone present was the boss of the Fu's enterprise and had the right to decide the future of the Fu's enterprise. Chapter 4:16. As we all know, the Fu Corporation is in desperate need of fresh blood to improve its brand. Su Mei was dressed in professional attire, looking very elegant. The esports industry, including the peripherals of the esports industry and online live streaming, all of these are immeasurable profits. It's a pity that our generation is old. Even if we have the advantage in making decisions, we still don't understand what the users really want. That's why I asked old Fu to hold this shareholders meeting. If Shiming takes over the Fu Corporation's new industry, I believe he will guide the Fu Corporation in the right direction. After the shareholders heard this, they all expressed their agreement. Young Master Fu is indeed capable. Many people like him playing games. He has already joined a team from another province and will appear in the National League. This way, he will bring a lot of popularity to the Fu Corporation. The sooner the company has a general manager, the older people like us can relax. 3 of the shareholders were related to Su Mei, and one of them was Su Mei's younger brother. Of course, they would agree. There were also a few small shareholders who didn't care, they just needed to wait for the dividends. After all, in their eyes, the Fu Corporation would belong to Fu Shiming sooner or later. Even if He Honghua had shares, it was useless. She couldn't do anything with only 25% of the shares. Fu Zhongyi was different. He had 45% of the shares and Su Mei's younger brother had 15%. It was obvious who the Fu Corporation belonged to. But there were still 2 old antiques who didn't agree with this. They had come together with He Honghua and Fu Zhongyi. They knew that if He Honghua hadn't sold all her assets, the Fu Corporation wouldn't have existed. Fu Zhongyi was ungrateful, but they didn't forget. I don't agree, the Fu Corporation is different from before. We have to consider all aspects. Who is on the Fu family tree and who should be the manager of the Fu Corporation? It will sound good if others hear about it. Su Mei had already expected these two stubborn old men to say that. She first glanced at He Honghua and said, "You two are right. However, if Sister Honghua's son could make a name for himself, I wouldn't let Shiming come to the company." Now, there was a rumor going around on the internet. How could a boy chase after another man? He did join the Supreme Alliance, but I'm guessing that after today, Jiu will be kicked out. So how can he be the manager of the Fu Corporation with such an immoral image? You. Before He Honghua came, she had been prepared to let Su Mei humiliate her. She was also very clear that things were not the same as they were in the past. Since the secretary was the mistress, she would not have the right to speak at the shareholders' meeting. It was a very straightforward reason because her shares couldn't compare to Fu Zhongyi's. As for Fu Zhongyi, He Honghua had long given up on such a man. But she knew better than anyone how obedient her Jiu was. She couldn't stand anyone splashing dirty water on her child. This was a mother's nature. Who are you calling immoral? He Honghua's round body stood up and she smiled coldly. You are a mistress. Do you have the face to talk about others? Su Mei immediately shrank back. He Honghua clearly didn't do anything to her, but it was as if she had been hit by He Honghua. Fu Zhongyi couldn't bear to let her go. He stood in front of Su Mei. Chapter 4:17. She was chasing He Honghua away. The shareholders all understood what he meant, and they all looked over. He Honghua glared at her. How dare you? Sister Honghua, I call you sister because I respect you. But if you don't want this respect, I can only ask the security guards to escort you out. Su Mei was pitiful. How can the shareholders' meeting be held if you yell at me like this? This is the company, not the countryside. If I don't ask you out, we can't continue. He Honghua was so angry that her chest hurt. I still have shares in the Fu family. Why can't I sit here? Yes, we all know you have shares. Su Mei pretended to be very reasonable. That's why I invited you to this shareholders' meeting. I've asked you many times to return the shares to Zhongyi. It's fine for us to buy them, but you always disagreed. Now that there are personnel decisions in the company, of course the major shareholders have the final say. The 25% shares are the tens of thousands of yuan that you took out when the company was first established. Sister Honghua, you can't always think that you can do whatever you want just because of a few tens of thousands of yuan. That won't do. All the old people who followed Fu Zhongyi knew that without the tens of thousands of yuan, the Fu family would be dead. But now, even this became Su Mei's topic of ridicule for He Honghua. No one could understand He Honghua's feelings. That kind of infuriating and sad pain made her breath tremble. The two shareholders couldn't stand it and wanted to say something. But Fu Zhongyi coughed coldly. This made them realize that it was no longer possible for Fu Zhongyi to remember their past kindness. Not only He Honghua, but even they seemed to have lost the right to speak. Su Mei was still talking. She raised her eyebrows and looked at He Honghua. The company really doesn't need you to create trouble. What are you waiting for, security guards? Ask her out, we have to continue the meeting. Yes. The two security guards rushed forward and grabbed He Honghua's arms. He Honghua's eyes were red. You are just a secretary, what right do you have to do this? And you, look carefully, I am the shareholder. The security guards had been here for a long time and they knew who was in charge of the company. They didn't even listen to He Honghua's words as they dragged her out. Just at this moment. Swoosh. Something rang out behind him. Subconsciously, they turned their heads back, and their calves were hit hard by the skateboard. It was so painful that the security guards almost immediately let go with a scream. He pulled the skateboard back. He returned to Fujio's feet. She stood in front of the door, dressed in black. Her hair was like silver, and her eyes were filled with hostility. However, her voice was very calm. "Who allowed you to touch my mother?" 9. He Honghua was stunned. Everyone in the meeting room stood up because of this scene. Even Fu Shiming, who had been hiding in the small partition, couldn't help but rush out and look at Fujio with disgust. Fu Zhongyi was even angrier. He didn't leave any face for Fujio and blasted, "You wastrel, how dare you show up? Look at all the shameful things you've done. Chasing a man all over the school? All of you, scram. Take your mother with you." Chapter 4:18. Su Mei knew how to behave. She quickly grabbed Fu Zhongyi's arm and tried to calm him down. She said to Fujio, "Your dad's health has always been poor, and you're still so mad at him. Everyone here is your elder. It's fine if you're rude, but you even brought a skateboard here to hurt people. This is not a place you should be. Auntie advises you to leave. Otherwise, it won't be good for you and your mom." Hearing that, Fujio tilted her head and smiled. She stood in front of He Honghua and put one hand in her pocket. She looked down at Su Mei. "Since you're a secretary, you should just stand there and do your job. This is a conversation between the Fu family. It has nothing to do with you." "You?" Su Mei narrowed her eyes. "Fujio, how come you've become like your mother? You don't care about the occasion." "I'll say it again, this is a shareholders' meeting." "You," Fujio interrupted her before she could finish. She was playing with a USB in her hand, and her voice was very calm. "It is precisely because this is a shareholders' meeting that I am warning you to do your job as a secretary. Otherwise, get out of here. You unfilial son." Fu Zhongyi heard Fujio's words and became even more ruthless. "Call security. Call all the security guards downstairs. Do you think this is a place where you can cause trouble?" Su Mei's face turned cold, and her eyes were filled with coldness. No one had ever told her to get out of here. This peasant Ban, if she didn't teach him a lesson for a few days, he would forget who he was. He deserved to be kicked out. Refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. How could the smart Fujio not see through Su Mei's thoughts? But she acted as if she didn't see or hear Fu Zhongyi's words. She walked over to the long table in the conference room. Then, she reached out and knocked on the back of one of the chairs. That person was none other than Su Mei's younger brother, Su Xing. "What do you want?" "Fujio, what the hell do you want?" Fu Shiming's arrogant little face was full of venom after seeing his actions. In contrast, Fujio's expression was much more indifferent. "I want to ask your uncle why he has the right to sit here." "Fujio," Su Mei said again, "Su Xing is one of the shareholders of Fu's enterprise. You should call him Boss Su when you see him. You shouldn't talk to him like this." "Yeah, how can you talk to President Su like that?" That is to say, this Fujio really followed He Honghua in death. No matter what, he was born in the countryside. Even if he is rich now, he can't change his bad habits. Luckily, Shiming is in the Fu's enterprise. The two shareholders looked at Fujio with disapproval. They didn't have many shares in their hands, but they always defended the Su family. Su Xing also sneered, "That's enough, Mr. He. Hurry up and leave with your brainless son. We don't want to always be a joke." Every time the shareholders' meeting was held, He Honghua would receive all kinds of ridicule. She would always clench her fists and tell herself that she had to endure for Joe's sake. But now, Joe was standing in front of her, that group of people. He Honghua couldn't stay any longer, not because she couldn't stand it, but because she was afraid that Joe would be wronged. But just as she was about to reach out her hand, Chapter 419. The youth's voice was neither loud nor soft, and it had a unique magnetism to it. It was very nice, and it didn't sound like the country bumpkin Fujio's voice at all. But it was just one sentence. This caused Su Xing's entire body to tremble, and even his expression to change. He, who was originally stained with the smell of alcohol, now looked a little shaky. Where was his previous steady appearance? Fujio laughed, but her eyes were cold. It seems that CEO Su has remembered. You. Impossible, it can't be you. Su Xing's lips were pale. Su Mei immediately felt that something was wrong. What do you mean it can't be him? Ah Xing, what's going on? No. Nothing happened. Su Xing's gaze was evasive. Fujio slowly pulled out the leather chair and sat in his previous seat. She looked at Su Mei and said 6 words handsomely, "That's it." That was a seat that only shareholders were qualified to sit in. It couldn't be what she thought. How could this be? Ah Xing, say something. Su Mei couldn't hold it in any longer. Su Xing stuttered and didn't dare to look at her sister. Finally, she pointed at Fujio angrily. You did it on purpose. You set me up, didn't you? Otherwise, how could I have lost so much that day? In the end, when he lost, he impulsively mortgaged his shares, just to get his money back. He wanted to mortgage it first and then redeem it, but he didn't expect that the other party wouldn't return the shares to him. Su Xing thought that the other party was dissatisfied with the price, so he planned to negotiate again today. How did this kid become the shareholder? Fujio crossed her long legs, looking vaguely like a CEO. Boss Su, that's too much. Did I hold a gun and force you to gamble? You are the one who did not take the shares of Fu's enterprise seriously and mortgage them as you please. After all, your shares are different from my mother's. When President Fu established the Fu Corporation, 90% of the money was provided by my mother. Later, when the Fu Corporation was robbed, my mother took out her remaining money to finance the company and became one of the shareholders. At that time, the Fu Corporation was not worth much, and even if it was rotting on the street, no one would know. My mother was obviously trying to save people. At that time, there were 2 uncles who fought together with her. These people's shares were obtained with blood and hardship, so they cherished it even more. Even if one day they couldn't continue living because of a mistress, they wouldn't think of selling their shares. President Su's shares are different. Just because he has a 3rd sister who is good at pillow talk, he obtained 15% of the Fu Corporation's shares. Of course he can mortgage something that he obtained so easily. You. Su Xing was so angry that his face turned red. Fujiomi and Hisumei's faces darkened. Fujio's words tore the faces of the 3 of them apart, both inside and outside. The 2 elders of the Fu Corporation never thought that Fujio would mention this. Sometimes, in the business world, he had to abandon many principles. But in the end, they were different from Fujiomi. Only after suffering would they understand that it was not easy. Only by living up to the people of the past could they live with a clear conscience. Now that the young man mentioned it, those days seemed to come back to them. Back then, they fought side by side. He Honghua was uncultured, but she had great foresight and strategy. Some people even admired her decisiveness and honesty. But later, Su Mei got involved. That woman was good at acting, pretending to be pitiful, and ruined He Honghua's reputation. Chapter 420. But who said that a village girl was destined to be incapable? Capability could never be determined by education or family background. At that time, they were so focused on their work that they didn't notice it. By the time they realized it, it was already too late. Fu Zhongyi was determined to protect Su Mei. As small shareholders, they couldn't say anything. They thought the result this time would be the same as the previous years. But what they didn't expect was that there would be such a twist. In fact, even He Honghua herself was stunned. Jill, you asked me for money 2 days ago to buy shares? Yes. Fu Jiu chuckled. I bought it for you as a birthday present. What do you think, Mom? Are you satisfied with this birthday present? Of course, Fu Jiu wouldn't tell He Honghua that targeting Su Xing was a plan she had ever since she got her computer out of the hospital. But she had to wait for the right time. And the day she came back from Tokyo was the perfect time. Gamblers couldn't quit gambling for the rest of their lives. She and the Almighty used all the money they earned from clearing games to set up this trap. The Su family members who bullied He Honghua. How could she let them be free and unfettered? It was just that every mature hacker would leave no trace when they killed someone. Fu Jiu was the same. Her plan was meticulous. Every word she typed was a trap. That was her. Even Interpol couldn't do anything about it. Hacker Z. He Honghua looked at the youngster in front of her, and her eyes turned red. Birthday present? So this was how it was given. She was Jill, really, Mom likes it very much. He Honghua sniffled, and her cheeks were puffed up. Fu Jiu shook her finger. It can't be just this. As she spoke, she stretched out her hand and turned He Honghua's body to face Su Mei, who was standing opposite them. She raised her eyebrows handsomely and said, Mom, come on, let's play something more fun. Didn't the mistress just kick you out? Now use your status as a 40% shareholder to make her scram. Su Mei's face turned pale instantly. She clenched her fists. Fu Jiu, your mom doesn't have this right. She does. Fu Jiu's voice was calm. 40% shares is enough to kick a secretary like you out. Or do you want security to kick you out? Su Mei bit her lips tightly, as if this was the only way she could control her emotions, which were on the verge of losing control. She couldn't just go out like this. There were more than 100 employees in the Fu Corporation. If she left like this, how could she continue to stay in the Fu Corporation? Su Mei had no choice but to look at Fu Zhongyi with tears in her eyes. Fu Zhongyi's heart ached. He turned to Fu Jiu and said, Who dares to touch the security guards? So what if I have 40% of the shares? Su Mei is my secretary, and I am the chairman. It's not just 40%. At this moment, the two old men who had been wanting to talk stood up and walked behind Fu Jiu. And 5% of our total. In that instant, even Fu Zhongyi's expression changed. You guys, loyalty. One mustn't forget one's roots. Those were the exact words of one of them. But Fu Zhongyi didn't listen. He felt like he had been betrayed, and he looked at Fu Jiu in exasperation. You've really grown up. If I knew that I would raise an ingrate like you, I might as well feed my money to the dogs. Zhongyi, don't be angry. Su Mei was still pretending. You're tuning into the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.